welcome to today's episode on placement years in industry. Today we're joined by 3 students who completed their placements, me, currently searching for a placement, as well as our School of Economics placement convener. So a placement year is a year-long work experience that students take as part of their degree in between their second year and final year. It really lets them gain more practical experience in the workplace, develop their skills, and helps with employability after graduating. Today we'll explore more experiences from everyone on the panel. So let's hear a bit more from our guests and about their journeys. Pete.
Thanks, Isaac. So my name is Dr. Peter Dawson. I am the Placement Director within the School of Economics, and I have been since we started the placement programme back in 2018, and our first cohort went out in 2020.
So I'm Lizzie Cumbers. I'm currently final year economics placement. Student. I did my placement year last year. I was a data analyst for Norfolk and Suffolk Constabulary.
My name is Archie Mcallister. I'm also a final year economics and finance student, and I did my placement year last year at Valentin as a private banking team assistant.
I'm David Bunzl. I'm the Chief Editor of the NEP, as well as a final year student who did my placement last year at the Treasury as an economist.
So our first question is, what did you gain the most from your placement year experience?
I think obviously first thing is real world experience. It's nice to interact with, say, proper grown-ups in the workplace. It made me less scared to go into the real world, I think. You think it's going to be this big, really serious, you have to be on it all the time, and obviously you still have to be on it, but you get a little bit more freedom, and you can just be more calm.
Yeah. So development into workplace after graduation was a big benefit for you?
Yeah, I was always a bit concerned about going into the working world. It's just a bit scary, isn't it? Yeah. But I definitely think that helped calm me down for it. Yeah.
I'd certainly say much less daunting knowing that you've only got the 12-month period, as opposed to going into a sort of full-time role and knowing that you might be there forever or whatever. You know that you've got this 12-month window, you can make the most of it, and then you're going back to uni, and then you can decide sort of what you want to do.
Yeah, I think largely it's sort of most of it covered. I think like the one insight that I had was sort of having some more information about what I actually like and what I don't like. Like, I very quickly realised that like deep analytical long-term projects are not my thing at uni and at work, and so like that was helpful to know, and also sort of like what sectors actually like what it is to actually work in this sort of service and how broad it actually is.
Yeah, that's all really interesting. So our second question is, do you think a placement year is more beneficial than an internship? If so, why is this the case?
I'll go first. We'll do a snake. So I think there's 2 things. I think like one benefit of the placement is you kind of get like I've got some experience, and like it's like it shows to other organisations that you kind of know what you're talking about. But at least in the experience, having not done an internship, but having seen interns come and go, I think that they have such a short window to actually be on the job that like you don't get any of the amount of skills that you actually acquire are pretty minimal. You really are just kind of like getting a glimpse of what it is. It takes 2 weeks to figure out who you're working with and what your job actually is. So then you've got 2 to 4 weeks to actually do some work. It's not very long. So in terms of skills, I think placements are much better.
Yeah, like David, I've not done an internship, but I'd say certainly having seen interns and having spoken to people who did internships, sometimes if you do internships, it's great on your CV because you get that name out there, especially if you get a couple of good ones. But in terms of what you actually get from the role, you're sort of more just observing and stuff like that, as opposed to getting stuck into a physical job, which of course you are over a 12-month period. And certainly for me as well, you've got time to sort of move around, and you're there for much longer, experience different like areas of the bank. Whereas I feel like internship, obviously it's good because it shows you go through the interview process and stuff like that and you'll get able to get them. And it makes it more credible for when you try and apply for graduation roles. But in terms of what you actually receive from the experience, I'd say placements definitely sort of trumps it.
Yeah. So the length of time really gives you that like experience and more responsibility within the role.
Yeah, they're really investing in you over a 12-month period. So in return, you've got to provide work for them. Whereas an internship is more of sort of a one-way benefit for the intern, less so you can give back to the company.
Yeah.
In such a short period.
I think I too haven't done an internship, but I think in a placement you get trusted a bit more as well. I think because you've been there a bit longer, you get some more of the bigger jobs. You get to kind of basically act like you are working there.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think an internship, if you manage to get multiple, you do manage to get more of a taster if you get them in different kind of sections, whereas we only know whether we do or don't like that specific thing. I suppose internships you get a broader range of an idea.
And presumably the organisation itself gets to know you much better over a 12-month period, so they kind of see how you're working over such an extended period of time, compared to an internship where as soon as it started, as you said, David, after a few weeks, you just settled in, and then in a few weeks' time you finished. So they can't really get a handle on how you're kind of coping in the workplace and so forth, and how you're managing workloads and the projects you're involved with, because the timeline is so narrow. So I think it works from the employer's point of view as well, for sure.
So our next question is, where did you find your placement and how did you find out about it? And as well as that, how did you prep for interviews or assessment centres you might have had?
So my main way of finding a placement, I believe it's Careers Central, sent out a weekly email blast. And I found that really helpful. Every week I'd go through the email and it was just a list of companies offering a placement, what the placement was, and kind of a little overview about what you do there. And so I'd sift through that every week. Oh, it had the deadlines and stuff as well on there. So I'd go through that, then made myself a list of what to apply for, and obviously go through the CV tailoring and stuff for each of those. I don't know that I expanded my view much outside of that, but I felt that the list was quite extensive and helpful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it a similar experience for you too? Or?
So for me, I did sort of do the same when I was scouring different sort of job websites. But in terms of banking, particularly private banking where I wanted to work, they don't tend to sort of, because they're a bit more niche, they don't tend to put them on these larger websites, so it'd be more so me finding these private banks and going on their sort of vacancies, careers websites, and just hoping that the sort of vacancy was available at the time.
Yes.
So did that rely on you knowing which banks to look for?
Yeah, I sort of did a bit of research in sort of that field. Also, I'm sure there's quite a few that I missed, but fortunately, still managed to get a job.
Yeah, mine was, I'd heard about the scheme already through talking to people, and also it was what's advertised and an email was sent around about it. But I guess fortunately didn't have the whole deal of having to tailor my CV, because they have a different process where you have to write essentially a CV but in a different format. So I never actually wrote a CV, so repeat.
Okay.
Would you say that's a benefit for applying to the civil service?
I'd actually say it's a disadvantage. I think what you need is a CV to write the style that they want. But because I did that, because the civil service stuff comes quite early, and that was one of the first things I applied to, I actually hadn't finished my CV by the time I'd applied.
I think it depends really, on what sort of role you're applying for. For me, for the roles that I really, really wanted, it made it so much easier because I felt I was much more what they were looking for, and it was what I was looking for. So the whole application process and my CV was more tailored to that, as opposed to having to sort of amend it slightly or sort of try and make it more applicable where it wasn't really. So yes, I'd certainly try and recommend going down the route of what your experience and what you've done up to this point would be more suited for, and what you actually want to go into.
So taking a more like personalised approach to that.
Yeah.
So you guys kind of knew where you wanted to go roughly, yeah? Because you said about private banking, you said government economic services, for example. But for Lizzie,
I had no idea.
So how did you kind of end up at the clients and police?
Well, to be honest, I quite liked econometrics, and when I
liked. Just kidding.
And what I ended up doing was actually quite similar, and they came and did a talk at the university, and they showed me a few of the projects they've done, and I managed to talk to the previous intern, and it made me appreciate what I would be doing. But I applied to a wide range of things, and it just happened that I did love what I ended up in.
Okay, great. So our next question is, how did you all find the transition back into your studies after your year on placement? And if there were any difficulties, how did you overcome them?
I don't know there was any difficulties as such. I found that a lot of the stuff I did has applied to this year's topics. To most of my modules, actually, that I've chosen, I've taken stuff from my placement. I don't think I found it that difficult. Obviously, I stayed in Norwich, so I didn't have to move, which was I didn't have much stress with all of that, so it was quite smooth for me.
I found it slightly more difficult because, well, a few reasons, but certainly towards the end of my placement, I was sort of getting real responsibility, getting really sort of stuck into the job, doing a proper job, and then for it to obviously, that it's coming to the end, and then transitioning back into university, from where you will sort of go from being the youngest person in your surrounding area for a whole year in the workplace to then being the oldest, being the fourth year. That sort of takes some getting used to again, I felt.
I also think I found it quite challenging. I think I suffer from ADHD, so I really treasure's maybe a bit strong word, but I really enjoyed the structure of work. So for me, it was still about something I was passionate about, which is about economics. But suddenly I didn't have the a clear structure to my day, and it was very self-driven, which is definitely something that I did learn on my placement, but it was very much abrupt change, which I don't necessarily think I was prepared for. I also think that work, you have a lot more of quick responding, low priority things that you have to do, which kind of, for me, made work quite exciting. Suddenly, this needs to be done in 30 minutes. When you come to uni, it's a lot more about, again, planning for the longer term, making sure that you've got those systems in place to ensure that you're on top of things, which I think was quite hard to suddenly transition out of.
And did you kind of know other people who were also on a placement year or say a year abroad? So was there a difficulty because obviously the majority of the cohort you started your university degrees with would have graduated by obviously the time you've come back. So what was, did you know many people that were in your kind of group coming back?
No, I'd say was probably the toughest part as opposed to the sort of academic side of things. It's more the social side of things, because you do 2 years sort of developing friendships and relationships, and you sort of know familiarity with people, and then all of a sudden you come back and that number's gone down to sort of a handful of people, and then we're starting again, trying to meet new people and socialise, because that's sort of what university is all about. I'd say that was definitely the most difficult part.
My friendship group was always quite small, if I'm honest, and they went on a year abroad, so we managed to go away and come back, which was really nice. I did stress that I wouldn't have someone just familiar in my final year, but I was really lucky with how it ended up.
I think it's kind of surprising how many people, at least you know, but it's definitely you lose a lot of the people that like you spend a lot of your time with. I lived with the same people for 2 years, and now none of them are here. So like that's definitely challenging. And I also think that at least in my experience, I sort of ended up with the people who I knew of or like had spent some time with, and you end up clinging too much more and spending much more time with. Because you don't really have the luxury of first year where you can kind of just spend as much time as you want socialising, because you've got other stuff you need to do.
Yeah.
Did you kind of develop a bit more with, did you find out about who else had come back, and obviously did you develop kind of friendships with other people maybe you didn't know beforehand, but also because of your shared experiences got to know them better because of that?
Yeah, because there were certainly people who maybe I'd seen at lectures and stuff like that, who I recalled from being sort of the same cohort as me, but I hadn't actually spoken to, and then obviously I assumed they did a placement or a year abroad, so something to speak about, and I have made a few friends from that.
Yeah, I definitely think there is something about like returners sort of sticking together. I think of all the group projects that I've been with, we've all been returners from placement or year abroad, so there's definitely something there about sort of sticking to the people you already know, which probably isn't a great thing.
There's a comfort thing though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like familiarity, and obviously you kind of clinging on to them because it's a shared experience. Is that you've got that in common. Even if you don't know them very well, you can share stories about your placements or when your experiences on placements, good and bad.
So was there any parts of your placement that you actually didn't enjoy? And how did you were you able to change that within your placement? How did that really work out?
I'll go first. I think this is going to sound bad, but I think there's lots of things that you don't enjoy about working. I think, as much as you can enjoy your placement, it is still a job. And with that, comes some pretty boring and, repetitive office space stuff that you've got to do. I think at first you get quicker at it, you get better at it, and you get better at managing your time of doing those sort of very boring emails or reading. I also think that you kind of learn what you dislike, because at first everything is kind of new and exciting. Even writing an email can be like, oh wow, talking to this person, and then you don't care so much that you're talking to that person and you just want to get the job done. So you kind of figure out what you do and dislike, and then there is definitely the ability, once you kind of know what you're doing, to pick what you're doing as opposed to just being told what to do.
Yeah, I love my whole sort of placement from start to finish, really. There wasn't anything in particular I didn't like. Like David said, even something that people have been working for 40 years might find really boring and tedious. For me, it's new, so it was still exciting, and you wanted to be good at the most simple tasks. And just meeting lots of new people, I just found it all really exciting. Nothing that I didn't really like.
Okay, great.
My placement had quite a slow start. Because it was within the police, there was a lot of hoops to jump through, and there was a lot. Honestly, to start with, it was getting my computer set up, getting access to all of the systems I would need must have taken a month. So for the first 4 weeks or so, I was sat there kind of just watching training videos on YouTube of the systems I might need, and that was quite tough because it's training videos for hours on end. It's just not the most interesting, but once it started, it was good. Also, the main thing about my placement was it was completely online. I will admit I really struggled with that. It probably isn't very suitable for me in the future, which I've accepted. I still enjoyed the work, but I didn't really leave the house for a year, so looking back, it's tough that.
Mm-hmm. And that's quite unusual, isn't it? Because I think your experiences was more hybrid.
Mine was incredibly sociable. Yeah, so I sort of
Were
started
you in all the time then? Or were you
up until about Christmas. I was in 5 days a week in London, and then sort of after got a bit more leeways, maybe Fridays. Sort of go out in the city, go for a drink.
Complete
quite a
opposite.
contrast
Yeah,
in terms of
literally.
Lizzie's experience.
I think I had 2 days in the office, and the first one was my first day, and the second one was my replacement's first day.
Wow.
Was it 1 day turnover for teaching placements?
Wow.
Okay.
No, I would have found that incredibly difficult because, like David said, the job isn't necessarily. It's the people that make it all interesting.
Yeah.
That's for me. That was the whole part of it. Like the clients and the people you work with and the colleagues. If I was just sat at home doing what I was doing, then maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as I did.
Yeah, agreed. Mine was sort of in between this. I spent 3 days a week in the office and 2 days at home. I really struggled at being at home, but it was more like my commute was an hour and 15 minutes. I was like, if I don't have to go in, I guess I won't. But definitely, like the most enjoyable part of my placement was definitely meeting the people, working with people on exciting projects who were also excited to be there. I think was what made it exciting.
And did you know beforehand it was that remote, or was that not made clear?
No, I believe I knew that it was all online. I guess I didn't really think about how I would deal with that.
Of course, you've not experienced that before.
No, I mean, there was obviously COVID lockdown, but that's a little bit different. Yeah.
Was it like video calls and stuff like that?
Oh, there was a lot of video calls. I would be on the video calls every day, I would say. But it wasn't like constantly. It was a lot of project work. I think I did 3 or 4 projects over the whole year, just myself. So there was a lot of, this is what you could do, and then I'd go away and do it for hours, and then this is what I've done, do you want to look at it? And so there was a couple of 10-minute calls a day, but otherwise I just kind of only spoke to my housemates.
And did you get an opportunity to feed that back at the end of the placement? Did they ask you your reflections on it, or did they not ask that at all?
I didn't want to be negative.
Yeah. Okay.
They asked how I found it, and it was amazing, I loved it, I gushed. I should have said it was tough, but yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, but then you've kind of reflected on that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Obviously, you've identified maybe that's not, you like the role, but the environment in which you were doing the role wasn't best suited for your, for you personally.
I think if you're asked how you found it, honesty is a good idea. Mm-hmm. I think actually employers are really interested to find how you found it genuinely, because they want it to be enjoyable and they want to know how you found it if you struggled.
So the next question is, how do you think students like myself could maximise their chances of gaining a placement?
In my experience, I think it's about what extra information you can find is actually, even if it's like, it's not like insider trading or anything, but any sort of like expectation of what the assessment's going to be, how you can prepare, because all of the assessment centres are somewhat similar but also somewhat different. So if you can prepare yourself for those assessment centres, I think that really helps. I think that's the best thing to, like, in terms of preparing to get a placement. And I say don't be scared to reach out to people. I've had people reach out to me about how I got it, and on LinkedIn who I didn't know, and often I respond, not always, but often. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say certainly in terms of trying to get opportunities for placements as well, I'd say utilise your network, whether that's your like close network or sort of more far-fetched network, because it is very difficult sort of scouring all these websites, all these placements and stuff. So if you have sort of know someone who might know of a role that might not be placed or something like that, then that's definitely give you more opportunity.
I think personalising your applications is quite important. I know a couple of people at the moment who are about to go on their placement, or supposed to be. One of them did detailed research and showed passion for what he wanted, and he's managed to get a placement. The other one just kind of sent out basic CV with the information but didn't personalise them at all, and he's really struggled this year to find a placement. So I know it's extra effort and it's annoying, but I would really strongly recommend personalising them.
I know it's easier said than done, but I think you're much more effective applying for sort of like a handful of companies, but really doing ones that you really want to do and understanding the role so that you can sort of tailor yourself perfectly for that role, as opposed to sort of blanket, oh, I've done 10 applications today. But realistically, the chances of you, or the hope of you actually hearing back from any of those is pretty slim. Whereas if you actually prioritise sort of a handful of like 5-10 that you really think you're suited for, and make sure that you got the best opportunity to get those. Because the thing is, well, if you apply for sort of 50 in a week and you don't hear back, then it's damaging as well in terms of your motivation to keep applying for more.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's certainly what I'd say.
I think that's important, is to tailor. I think a couple of you mentioned about tailoring the applications, but obviously showing your passion for the role. So rather than just doing, I think, as you said, Archie, just a scattergun approach of just doing as many applications as possible, be a bit more selective, but spend more time in terms of tailoring those applications, because your interest and passion for the role will come through stronger than a simple generic application. Because they'll spot that. The organisations will spot that straight away, say, oh, well, this is just a generic application this person's put in. They're not really showing a passion for why they want to do this role. The other thing that I would, in addition, say, because obviously all of you have talked about your preparation for assessment centres or interviews or whatever, but I would take a step back as well in terms of, well, what should you do in terms of looking for placements? And I think one of the things that we try and encourage the students to do is broaden the search. So don't be too narrow, both in terms of the type of role you want. Now, obviously, Archie, you said you definitely wanted to go into personal banking, so you'd have that narrowness, but that's fine. And obviously, you were successful, but that's not going to work for everybody. But having a kind of much broader range of, I guess yourself, Lizzie, you looked at a broad range of roles. I think that's important, but also geography. So a lot of placement students have a fixation on, I want to work in London, I want to be in London, and I want to work for a big organisation. Now, working in London, big organisation, there's going to be a lot of demand, there's going to be a lot of competition for those roles, and you can quite naturally get the same type of experience, in some cases better experience,
I think so.
At a smaller organisation, because you get to experience more kind of departments or more elements of that smaller organisation. So don't discount the fact there are smaller organisations out there which are equally valuable in terms of placement.
Yeah, and often with the smaller organisations, the placement role is probably quite a new role. So what it was for me, and it's very much what you want to get out of it, you can get out of it. Whereas I feel like if you're a large organisation, it's more structured. It's like, oh, you do 3 months here, you do this, you do 3 months here, you do this, sort of thing like that. Whereas literally from day one, it was, you talk to whoever you want, you get whatever you want from it, you go to client meetings, etc. If that's what you want to do, that's sort of what you get from it, which I wouldn't have got if I was sort of working in a massive bank.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say, just from, again, it will vary because you got your placements at different points in time. I think David, yours was quite early, you probably got it before Christmas.
Yeah.
Lizzie, yours was slightly later. I can't remember.
I was like March, I don't know.
Okay,
yeah,
so
March,
the kind of peak time almost is that a lot of placement students, when they're searching for placements, and obviously you're experiencing this at the moment, is that you've got to have resilience because you're going to get a lot of rejections and no feedback. And it's like, it can be demoralising. It can be like I've just got another rejection here. So it's easy for me to say as placement director, but building in some kind of resilience. And that's more likely to happen if you have this scattergun approach of just applying to loads and loads of places. So you kind of got to almost realise that's going to happen. It will still probably happen when you do selective ones, and you think you've done a really good job in terms of your application or the interview and the assessment centre and so forth. So, but having that kind of level of resilience is important.
But the thing is, it's like anything. If you know that if you only did a sort of a handful or 10 or so, and you know that you put 100% effort into making sure that you feel like your application is perfectly suited for this role and you've done everything you can, and they turn you down, then it sort of is what it is.
Yeah.
Whereas if you just applied and it's still taking you about 45 minutes to apply out the application, fill it all out, and then you got rejected, then you were probably expecting to get rejected whilst you were sitting there for 45 minutes.
Yeah. And it's time consuming, isn't it?
Yeah.
Obviously searching for placements is a time consuming endeavour, and again, I think a student told me a few months ago that they treated the searching for a placement and trying to get a placement like an extra module. It actually took that level of effort to actually get the placement. But the payoff is there, isn't it? Because obviously you get that 1 year experience. It might take some of the pressure off when you...
The thing is, as well, I'm sorry, I keep speaking quite a lot, but the way I looked at it is you either do it in the second year, or as soon as the second year finishes, you're just doing the same thing, but then for grad roles, which is far more competitive, and also it's a more serious year in third year because it's highly weighted.
Yeah.
So either way, you've got to apply for jobs, you're just doing it a year early where it's sort of less pressure.
Yeah, you've got to do it at some point, so yeah, you do it in second year where the weight of the second year is lower.
And if you don't get a job, at least you have to practice of applying and interviews and stuff.
I also think that like with both approaches in terms of like scatter or if you like narrow your search quite a lot, so that's things you're particularly passionate about. You, no matter what you do, you're going to get to like personal interviews, which we haven't really spoken about. And I think that like from noticing other people who are applying in third year, like it's a real skill how to interview well, and it's kind of pretty consistent across the board in terms of what they're actually looking for and how to present yourself well. Often you'll find that actually like, the questions that they ask you are also pretty much exactly the same no matter what the job is. So once you like can kind of figure those things out, even if it's before you apply by doing like practice stuff, or applying to other like non-placement roles, I think that's definitely like advantageous, and better to learn in second year than in third year or when you're out of uni, because I think when you're out of uni then it becomes quite trying.
So would you say like the Career Central helped you build up those sort of interview skills, or is it something else that sort of helped you?
Okay, that's a difficult question to answer. I didn't do practice interviews with Career Centrals, but I did do practice interviews with other people. I've also I think I'm slightly older than the average member of my cohorts. I've done quite a few jobs before I started doing placements, not in the career that I wanted to do, and certainly not like career jobs, but I've done lots of interviews. And so I think it was a skill I already was somewhat had before searching, but I think that was advantageous to me and probably one of the reasons that I was able to find a placement quicker.
So have any of you had any like conversations with where you had a placement about sort of returning or any sort of future opportunities?
Yes, so I had multiple discussions with mine actually. We were both very keen on the idea of me going back. My placement was in a very small team. There was only about 10 of us total. So we've said basically we both like the idea, but there has to be a position available for me. I'm in contact with them, waiting to hear back, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah.
Similarly with Lizzie, I would like to go back, and they've expressed their interest in wanting me to come back, but there wasn't actually any graduation roles in the area of the bank that I wanted to work in, so it's more so just sort of keeping in contact and waiting for that sort of role to come available, and then hopefully you'll be the sort of top of the list when they hire.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the benefits of a bigger organisation is that they do have sort of system is in place. So there was 10 of us within my department, and at the end of my placement, I did an assessment centre, and 4 of the 10 managed to get them, and luckily I was one of them. So today I've actually received my onboarding information, so it's very exciting. Yeah. But yeah.
So it's very much dependent on the kind of size and maybe the experience of the organisation of having placement students. The ones that have been doing it for maybe many years and they're a big organisation and more likely to have, as you said though, the systems in place to kind of make return offers to the students.
Although doing placement in a large organisation might make it more structured, it also might mean that it's more structured when you leave the placement. So it's pros and cons.
Absolutely.
So our next question is, how does UEA School of Economics support students in finding a placement? How has the job market sort of changed and altered? Maybe you can speak to that a bit, Pete.
Yeah, so I mean, the job market has changed. I mean, my experience of the job market in terms of, particularly for placement students, has changed quite a bit, because actually even before we introduced the placement scheme here, I'd had experience of being involved in placement schemes in other universities for the last 20-25 years or so. And what we have observed over that period, over that long duration, is to get a placement now is almost the same as getting a grad role. There are so many more hoops that students will have to jump through to get a placement. So, obviously there's an application, but then there'll be like aptitude tests or numeracy tests. There'll be maybe a video interview, and this is even before we go to an assessment centre or have a final interview. So there are so many more steps now, and I think part of that is simply because more people at university now, and these organisations have to put in place ways of which they're going to sift through the applications, because some of these will have lots and lots of people applying. So they've got to have a way in which they're kind of filtering out the students that they're ultimately going to select to go into assessment centres and interviews and so forth. So that's one thing. The second thing is obviously much more recently you've got obviously the growth of AI, generative AI, and it seems like from what I can see and what I've heard and what I've been told is that some organisations are now using generative AI to kind of even use that in terms of sifting application, even to the extent of if students doing a pre-recorded video interview, a human is not looking at that. They're using AI to kind of select, which is a bit, for me, as an older person, is a bit disconcerting, because you want that kind of human kind of person kind of judging that. But so it's kind of just knowing how organisations are using these, what techniques they're using in terms of selecting students. So we're aware of that, and obviously what we're trying to do is obviously make sure that we've got resources available and support available. So I know, David, you said you didn't actually really need the support, and that's fine. Or you used other support mechanisms to get your placement. But what we're very keen on doing is obviously providing workshops, etc., which students are encouraged to go to, but having that kind of one-to-one support where we can actually do mock assessments or mock interviews, and particularly for those that have had less experience of doing those. And I think what's important is doing that prior to going to an assessment centre or an interview, and understanding the process involved in terms of doing that. So you're right, the more times you do it, the more experience you get. But it's then knowing, well, what should I be doing? How should I structure my answer? What is this Carl and Star framework I should be using in terms of framing my answer? And obviously, it's not always apparent that the students know about that kind of structure, but once you know it, it's then quite straightforward to apply that to a whole range of different scenarios and different experiences that students have got. It doesn't have to be based on your kind of previous job experience. It could come from any area. It could be, you're involved in societies, it could come from your academic side, it could come from your kind of hobbies, etc. There's a whole range of things you can draw upon. So you've lived those experiences. It's just kind of making sure they're structured in the right way, and we can kind of help a lot with that. And I think our success rate is quite good for the students that kind of seek out that support. That's quite a long-winded answer.
Yeah, I hadn't really had much sort of work experience really prior to my interviews. Like you said, I was sort of had a role as social secretary for the tennis club here, so I was like tailoring that role, or like even roles I had during school, and I was still talking about those. They just sort of want to know how you can apply yourself to this situation, as opposed to it being, because obviously we're all young people that are early careers programs, they're not expecting you to have 10 years worth of experience and loads of examples to draw upon. So it's just about tailoring what you can to sort of the questions. And
it's having that variety as well. So it's not, because the obvious thing would be just to throw lots of academic examples. So I can demonstrate teamwork by, I did some group work in such and such a module, or managing workloads. I had lots of deadlines for my coursework and my exams coming up and so forth. But I think what's important is having that variety of experiences.
Yeah.
Again, you've got, as you said, Archie, you've got the tennis example, but there are obviously other examples you can draw upon. Just think about how you can use those in different scenarios.
And often they want to hear something that's a bit more interesting.
Exactly.
But in my interview, I was talking for quite a long period of time about tennis, and that made it sort of the whole thing much more comfortable. Whereas if you just sort of went on about a group of uni work or something like that, which probably everyone's sort of given the same answer,
you're instantly being more memorable to them because you're using a kind of unique example. Unless, of course, they didn't like tennis, so then you're in trouble.
Hate tennis.
That's great. That's really great to hear, like building up that sort of personal interaction during the interview process to help build skills for the placement. So thank you for listening to our podcast about the placement experience. If you enjoyed the discussion, give us a like and let us know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions for any future topics you'd like us to cover. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to the NEP channel and for more episodes. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to bringing you more economic insights in the future.